everyone, I'm Leanne.
And I'm Howlin' Mad Michael.
And this is Unschooled History. It's the start of October, and we're already in a Halloween mood here at Unschooled History. This week, we're talking about the history of werewolves. Sit back and be ready for a howling good time as we dive into the depths of the human psyche, as well as the real medical condition that help inspire the myth and perhaps even a popular fairy tale. And sometimes where Michael is concerned, the human psyche is very, very deep.
Very deep indeed.
Oh, I mean, you are a fan of... crap, what's his name? The guy who recited that poem at the end of Thriller.
Oh, Price. Vincent Price.
Ah, yes. My husband, the Vincent Price fan. Although Lon Chaney made the better monster. Okay, so the idea of the werewolf actually goes back to the Neolithic period. But these original werewolves were no shapeshifters. Rather, they were elite warriors. These warriors would kill a dangerous animal, such as a bear or a wolf, drink the blood, and wear the pelt as part of their initiation into the warrior class. It was believed that doing so would allow them to take on the fierceness, strength, and other attributes of the animal that they had killed. Which is kind of also the reason cannibalistic tribes would consume the flesh of the warriors that they had killed.
Yes.
The whole idea that they would then consume their strength, you know? But in this case, we have Neolithic hunters and warriors totally believing that they became as strong and powerful as what they had killed. And it wasn't just early Neolithic, it was late Neolithic, it was really up until basically all of Europe, up until especially the Scandinavian areas, as well as the I've lost my word. Not Baltic.
I can't find it. I'm sorry.
Slavic areas as well, and really all over Europe until the Romans came in and started conquering things, which is something else entirely because, of course, in ancient Rome, they believed that the founders of Rome were Romulus and Remus, and that Romulus and Remus had been nurtured by a she-wolf.
Yes.
So, really, the Romans heavily identified with wolves as well. So it's no surprise that you have this identification with wolves, and especially with the ability to transform into wolves. But of course, before ancient Rome, there was ancient Greece. And this is an illustration from the story of Lycaon of Arcadia. According to the myth, Zeus paid a visit to Lycaon, who was the king of Arcadia at that time, and Lycaon wanted to test Zeus and make sure, okay, this guy really is who he says he is. He really is the king of the gods. He really is omnipotent. He really is omniscient. I don't really believe it. I don't really believe he's Zeus, because why would a god come to see me? So I'm just going to test him. And there are multiple versions of this myth. Maybe it's a servant, maybe it's a captive. The most popular myth is that it's his infant son. whatever version of the myth you see. Um, and like I said, it's the most popular myth version of the myth is that it's his own infant son that Lycaon does this to. He kills, cooks up, and serves him, his own infant son, to the god. And Zeus is so offended by this and by this child sacrifice or human sacrifice that he turns Lycaon into a wolf. And that's what's being illustrated here. And it's just really, really kind of sickening, the idea of this sacrifice of your own child. This was something that was even sickening to the ancient Greeks. Something that is reflected in the original Hippocratic Oath that doctors take when they become doctors. And it's no wonder why we see this idea in the human psyche that you must be a terrible monster to do something like this.
Yes.
Early Christian writers were also writing about werewolves. St. Augustine of Hippo, for example, wrote about werewolves, specifically in his work City of God, in which he wrote, "It is very generally believed that by certain witches' spells men may be turned into wolves." The Capitulatum Episcopi also mentions the connection between werewolves and witches, and we will be talking about witches next week. Like I said, we're very much in a Halloween mood here. It is our favorite holiday. And when I was searching for an illustration for this part, I came across this. It said it was from St. Augustine's City of God. But, Michael,
I think it may be St. Francis of Assisi and the Wolf of Gubbio.
and tell us the story.
St. Francis was taken to the village of Gubbio, which was being plagued by a wolf that was attacking people and hungry for food. St. Francis talked to the wolf and got it to accept food in exchange for protecting the villagers
And their flocks, right?
and the flocks.
And this goes back to one of the ways that it was thought was possible to cure a werewolf. They believed that preaching and baptism would help to cure the werewolf of his affliction, and they would then no longer be a werewolf. And then also another idea was you call the werewolf by his Christian name 3 times. The number 3 being a particularly powerful number because it is the number of the Trinity. And really, during the Middle Ages, when the Roman Catholic Church was at the height of its power, throughout the Middle Ages, especially the late Middle Ages and into the early Renaissance, the belief surrounding werewolves was so much about Christianity, about faith, about holiness and baptism, and that was how you cured a werewolf. So that is, again, part of the human psyche that has brought about and helped to create the legends surrounding werewolves. Now, of course, not all werewolves are bad. Not all werewolf legends revolve around evil and about malicious monsters. This is the Wolver, a creature from Scottish mythology. He's actually very benevolent. He's a fisher, as you can see here in the picture, and what he's known for in Scottish mythology is for fishing and leaving the fish that he catches on the windowsills of the poor and helping them have food. which is really very awesome. So he's just this wolf man creature who helps the poor. And so very benevolent. And they have something similar here in Irish mythology. The Feola. And he's an Irish werewolf who is known as a guardian of children and of wounded men. And as you can see in this illustration, he really is kind of half man, half wolf. And like I said, he would stand guard over children who were in trouble. If you were a man who was wounded, or a woman, really, who's wounded, he's going to stand guard over you as well. So, again, very, very benevolent. And I've heard similar stories of dog-headed men in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Who are often seen doing business and are protectors of small businesses, I believe, if I remember what I read correctly, if I remember the stories correctly. But there you go. So in many legends, you do have a benevolent werewolf instead of a malicious monster. Okay, so let's talk about the general characteristics of the werewolf as we know the creature today. They transform at the full moon, they can be killed by silver, and the making of a werewolf is often by magic or by being bitten by one. That's how we think of a werewolf these days.
Generally, yes.
In general. Most of these beliefs actually only date back to the 19th century. Although the biting thing dates back at least to the Middle Ages. So here's the question. What within the human psyche and within the human experience could have possibly inspired these characteristics and the common werewolf legend as it is known today, especially here in the West? Okay, so let's start with this guy. Meet Petrus Gonsalves and his wife Catherine. Petrus suffered from a condition called hypertrichosis, which can be congenital or acquired. And sometimes the acquired version is associated with a form of cancer, but not always. Petrus was born in 1537, approximately, in Tenerife, Spain, and at the age of 10, he came to the court of Henry II of France. From there, he was sent to the court of Margaret of Parma, the regent of the Netherlands, and it was there that he met Catherine and they were married. 4 of their 7 children also suffered from hypertrichosis and were painted. As you can see, hypertrichosis is just it's excessive growth of hair, and it's really a catch-all term for excessive growth of hair. There are some very specific forms of hypertrichosis. One of them, hirsutism, affects only women and children, and it's the result of too many androgens. Sometimes it's the result of genetics. I know hirsutism a little too well because just like my husband, I have to shave my face every day if I want to keep it free of hair and stubble and not grow a bit of a beard because I have too many androgens. So I have it. I know what it's like to suffer from this particular form of hypertrichosis. It sucks. But, at least I'm not fully hairy like Petrus here or his kids or others who have had to suffer from more extreme versions or worse from the acquired versions that are associated with cancer, because that's really nasty. As an interesting side note, the marriage of Petrus and Catherine very likely was the inspiration for a favorite fairy tale. Michael, what do you think that is?
Could it be Beauty and the Beast?
It is Beauty and the Beast. This marriage inspired Beauty and the Beast. And a lot of people love it. Whether you love the original, or you love one of the various versions from around the world, or you love the Disney version best, a lot of people love this fairy tale. And so here we have the real life couple that inspired the story. So, and as well as one of the conditions that inspired the werewolf stories. Another condition, of course, is clinical lycanthropy. And it is actually a psychiatric condition in which a person believes themselves to be a wolf. I've represented it here with a scene from the official video for Michael Jackson's song Thriller, which is actually a cool song. Still popular, by the way, especially around Halloween.
Yes.
I've also noted a case of clinical lycanthropy in a favorite book of mine. Arrow's Flight, the second book of the Heralds of Voldemort trilogy by Mercedes Lackey. You've got Arrows of the Queen, Arrow's Flight, and Arrow's Fall. And in Arrow's Flight, there's a minor character that heralds Talia and Chris encounter, who has been accused of stealing chickens. And it turns out that she's not eating them. She's actually sacrificing them to the wolves because she believes that the wolves are her friends and have been talking to her, and that because she's been stealing these chickens and giving them to the wolves, that the wolves will teach her how to become one of them. And that, boys and girls, is a excellent example of clinical lycanthropy. And it's a little creepy. I was creeped out a little when I read that scene. I didn't know the word for the mental illness that this girl was suffering from in the book, but until I started the research for this episode. But it's the best example in any form of popular culture that I've ever seen. One of the more common illnesses out there that might be associated, might be a cause for the development of the werewolf myth, is rabies. Hypertrichosis, fairly rare. Clinical lycanthropy, fairly rare. Rabies, not that rare. So let's talk about rabies itself and why it would have affected werewolf mythology. They're both transmitted by bites. They are. And let's face it, you see a wolf. The wolf is more vicious than the usual wolves that have been hanging around. And it attacks without any kind of provocation. And it bites your friend. And your friend then develops flu-like symptoms, followed by agitation, confusion, and hallucination. Because that is what rabies looks like in a human being. They start out with flu-like symptoms, hence the picture on the right, where she looks like she's just hanging out on her couch with a thermometer and everything. Maybe she's just suffering from the flu. No. Rabies starts out with just flu-like symptoms in a human, then develops into agitation and confusion and hallucination, among other things, as the disease spreads further in through the spinal cord and into the brain. This, boys and girls, is why it is so important to make sure that your pets, like especially your dogs and cats, have their rabies vaccine up to date, because it is a terrible way for an animal to die. And honestly, it's a terrible way for a human being to die, too.
Yes.
So, because of the confusion, they don't remember what went on during the night. And last night was the full moon, and they thought that they had transformed into a werewolf or something because of the hallucinations. Your friend is a werewolf, right? Well, back before people understood diseases like rabies, that was the only obvious conclusion. And just for the record, foaming at the mouth isn't actually a major sign of rabies, like what you see depicted in movies like Old Yeller or To Kill a Mockingbird, when Atticus Finch shows off why he's called One Shot Finch and takes out a rabid dog with a single shot, which really most merciful thing Atticus could have possibly done for that dog. What looks like foaming at the mouth is actually just hypersalivation, because animals with rabies tend to salivate a lot. And even then, that's not a sure sign. Instead, what you're looking for is an animal that's either hyper aggressive or, believe it or not, unusually calm and docile. For example, a squirrel. Now, an eyes open baby squirrel that has lost its way, dropped out of the nest or whatever, may in fact actually just go and cling to a human, say, hey, help me find my nest, help me get home. That's fine and dandy. But you got an adult squirrel who is super calm and super tame, and they weren't raised that way, but they still come and they're all like, I'm going to let you pet me. Don't pet the squirrel. Don't pet the squirrel. Michael and I saw a mouse the other day. This mouse had somehow made its way into my bathtub. It happens when you live in the middle of the woods, people. It happens. But most mice that live in these woods around us are all like, I am going to run around the tub like mad and try and jump out of it. This mouse was all calm, docile, and not afraid of me at all. Let me carry it outside and get it out, and until I learned that that could be a sign of rabies, the only thing I could think of was that either A, this is the same freaking mouse that's done it a few times before, or B, it's an escaped pet. It could have happened. Escaped pets happen. But now looking back, I'm wondering, okay, maybe that mouse was rabid, and I'm just so glad I didn't pet it.
She didn't handle it with her bare hands.
I didn't handle it with my bare hands. I handled it with 2 bowls that I kept together so that it could not escape, and got it far away from the house. And quite honestly, if that stupid copperhead is anywhere around, or maybe the black rat snake that we found a few years ago, or any snake or other animal that eats mice, I hope they ate the mouse. Because reptiles cannot get rabies. Only mammals can get rabies. So, yes, rabies has been associated with werewolf mythology as a possible explanation. It's obvious why. And yes, they might be hyper aggressive, or they might be unusually calm and docile. And that could explain some of the mythology, like the Wolver, who are who are actually considered to be beneficial. So there you go. You never know.
Where did my soda go?
Okay, now here's one that threw us for a loop. Down syndrome was also once associated with werewolves. It surprised us when we were doing the research for this one. And this is proof of why Wikipedia should not be quoted but can be a good jumping off point for research. The Wikipedia article on werewolves states that Down syndrome was thought by some scholars to be a cause of lycanthropy, and then gives as reference a book called Of Wolves and Men by Barry Holston Lopez. Well, lucky us, our local library has a copy. So, while Mike was at work, I was doing my errands. I went to the library. I checked out the book. The whole thing is a fascinating read, and I highly recommend it. It's awesome. I love it. I found the reference on page 227. Thank you, Index. And here's the exact quote, which I think you'll agree is not the same as what Wikipedia claims it says. At a time when no one knew anything about genetics, the idea that a child suffering from Down syndrome, small ears, a broad forehead, a flat nose, prominent teeth, was the offspring of a witch and werewolf was perfectly plausible. So yes, the idea is that Down syndrome is the result of a werewolf being the father of the child, not, as Wikipedia says, a cause of lycanthropy. But still, this was something interesting to learn, because I never would have thought of it. And I'm so glad that I found this book because, like I said, fascinating read all the way through. Alright, so what's the deal with the silver? Seriously, why silver? So this belief really only dates back to the 19th century. And there's a very large part of it that is similarity magic. Silver represents the moon, just like gold represents the sun. The idea of a silver bullet or other silver weapon affecting a werewolf negatively is much the same idea of how kryptonite affects Superman. The element is from his home planet. That which gives him his powers is countered by something representative. The same holds true for werewolves. There's also the idea of silver as medicine. Being a werewolf is a blood-borne illness, and silver has antimicrobial properties. It is, in fact, used topically for that very reason, and has been since ancient times. We know this because Hippocrates wrote about it. So, if silver can help heal, then why not help heal the illness that is lycanthropy? You rub it on the skin for for a cut or whatever, put it into a bandage or whatever. Well, why not shoot or cut the werewolf with it? Makes sense. And of course, there's pop culture. Werewolves are everywhere in pop culture. In fact, the silver reminded me of a old Garfield comic strip. There's a story arc in which there is a werewolf in town, and the werewolf was the local butcher, and Garfield beats the werewolf by smacking him over the head with baby chickens. Well, not baby chickens, those are chicks, but with young hens, basically. And the name of the butcher is Mr. Silver. A young hen is a pullet, which of course rhymes with bullet. So Garfield cured the lycanthropy by beating him up with by beating Mr. Silver up with Mr. Silver's pullets. Bad joke, I know. Okay, so Harry Potter fans, of course, they're going to be familiar with Remus Lupin, good guy, and Fenrir Greyback, bad guy. Twilight fans, you know Jacob. Some of you are probably on Team Jacob. There's an RPG called Werewolf the Apocalypse. Michael and I actually used to do a Lord of the Rings roleplay in which Michael worked into elements from Werewolf the Apocalypse. Tell us about that. What elements you worked in?
Well, it wasn't so much. I used the werewolves from Werewolf the Apocalypse to substitute for the little known werewolves from the Silmarillion in Tolkien's world. Because there was so much more to go on. Tolkien had werewolves in his Silmarillion world. They were huge creatures.
And the werewolf character you played was from which clan?
Fianna.
Of course.
Scottish.
The Scottish clan. Because that's what my husband does. And quite honestly, when I looked into the different clans and the different types of werewolves and everything, I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. Still haven't played the game, but I should mention that it is a sister game to their vampire game, White Wolf's vampire game, and I believe that they are in the same universe as Mage the Ascension.
That whole universe was done away with, and they brought out new games. But they are sister games.
And it is all really cool. Of course, you have the early 1980s cult classic, An American Werewolf in London, and its sequel, An American Werewolf in Paris, from over a decade later. Eddie from the Munsters. Mm-hmm. He was a werewolf.
With his dog, Mr. Wolfie.
You have it in music. Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London. Cool song. I enjoy listening to it, especially around this time of year. Oh, woo, Werewolves of London. It's a fun song. And I think it's actually from the American Werewolf in London soundtrack, isn't it?
I don't remember.
I don't know either. I need to look it up later. There's a couple of other songs that...
I like listening to one called Wolf and One by Alexander Dale.
Honey, wrong name.
Heather Dale?
Heather Alexander.
Heather Alexander.
Who, of course, is now Alexander James Anderson, I think. I think that's the last name.
Oh, boy.
That he took when she became he. No, Heather Dale is a different singer entirely, honey.
I get Sarah's mixed up.
Heather Dale is more well known for her Arthurian legend music.
Mm. Oh, I know. I like Wolf and One.
I know. Wolf and One is fun. And then there's another Heather Alexander song that was actually written by Mercedes Lackey, because Mercedes Lackey is not just an author, she's a lyricist. She's awesome. I love her. And it's called Snow Magic. And they both involve this werewolf type theme. Wolf and One, it's from the point of view of a woman who has taken a werewolf as a lover and given birth to 2 pups as the result. And Snow Magic tells the story of a young man named Alexei who falls in love with a maiden in the woods who turns out to be the queen of the local wolf pack. She's referred to in the song as the Bitch Queen. and she transforms back into a wolf at the end. And so it's a really, really cool song. I highly recommend both songs if you are into werewolf mythology and or wolves in general. They're a lot of fun. Um, there's another cool piece called Battle Song of the Fianna
Mm-hmm.
that I love to listen to. It's purely instrumental. And it's all really, really cool. And yeah, werewolves are just all over pop culture.
Yes.
There's, I think, Teen Wolf.
Yes.
I don't know. There's so many that you can't really just keep track of all of them. So there you go. There's the history of werewolves and how the werewolf mythology may have come to exist. Like we said, next week we're talking about witches, simply because there is a loose connection. And believe it or not, the week after that we will be talking about a real life inspiration for the vampire mythology.
And it's not the typical one you may be thinking of.
No. And then finally, we will actually be doing an episode on the history of Halloween. So there you go. And that's what you can expect this month from us. Because, like I said, Halloween is our favorite holiday. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Drop your favorite holiday in the comments if you want to know more about its history. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you want to know more about. And also, don't forget to go to our Facebook page and follow it if you haven't, because we've got those awesome daily history facts and creepy Friday facts and funny memes. And like I say every week, the Facebook page is where we do our live stuff on the occasions that we go live. Which my sister, who is also a fan, and not just because she's my sister, she genuinely enjoys this stuff, and actually has been using it to help homeschool her son, which is awesome. Crap, I forgot what I was going to say.
Huh.
Shut up. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, Facebook. Oh, yeah, she was asking me, how are you going to do the live stuff over the winter? It's going to get so cold. Yeah, I admit it gets cold over the winter, yes. Especially here in Missouri, and, you know. So, and I told her, you know what? We're just going to do what we do, and if we end up being all freezing our butts off for the sake of a really awesome live video, then so be it. We will freeze our butts off for the sake of a really awesome live video. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know exactly what we're going to do in the future. We just know over the next few weeks because we planned this one out very carefully. And sometimes we don't even know until like 3 or 4 days before we post what the heck we're doing. So I'm kidding. We actually take a full week of research on everything. And like I said, if you really, really want to know some more about a subject, you want us to go more in depth, just go ahead, ask the question. We don't care. We'll answer it. So, yeah, hit the subscribe button, follow us on Facebook. We love you all.
Good evening.